I was stopped at airport security because someone said I was carrying a dangerous device, and if I missed that flight, I would lose my job by morning. The guard spoke calmly, like this was routine, while my daughter sat on the floor counting the tiles with her shoe. I remember checking my pockets again and again, waiting for someone to say there had been a mistake. My brother was standing 10 feet away, staring at his phone. That was when I realized everything I trusted was about to break. I did not wake up that morning thinking my life would end at an airport security checkpoint. It was 6:20 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of morning where the sky over Dallas looked pale and unfinished, like it had not decided what kind of day it wanted to be yet. I remember the time because the digital clock above gate C-17 blinked when it switched from 6:19 to 6:20, and I remember thinking I was early for once. Being early mattered to me. If I missed this flight, I would lose my job. Not maybe, not eventually. By the end of the day, I knew the rule. 3 missed deployments in a year, and you were out. No appeals, no explanations. The wind farm in West Texas had a turbine down, and I was the only maintenance tech certified for that system on short notice. They had already called me twice the night before to make sure I was coming. I was coming. My daughter Lily sat on the floor beside my backpack, her legs crossed, dragging the rubber toe of her sneaker along the grout lines. She was counting the tiles quietly to herself. She always did that when she was tired. She had been up since 4, because she was afraid she would oversleep and make me late. I bent down and fixed the strap on her shoe. "Just a few more minutes," I told her. "Then we get on the plane." She nodded, serious like a grown-up, and went back to counting. That was when the TSA agent waved me forward. "Sir, can you step to the side for a moment?" He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. He sounded bored, like he was asking me to move my car so someone else could get out. I stepped aside. Another agent joined him. Then a third. One of them picked up my backpack and set it on a gray plastic table. "There's an item in here we need to ask you about," the first agent said. "What item?" I asked. He did not answer right away. He pulled on blue gloves, slow and careful, and unzipped the front pocket. Lily stopped counting. I watched his hands move through my things. Phone charger, work gloves, a folded receipt from a gas station in Amarillo. My fingers curled into my palm without me realizing it. Then he took something out and set it on the table between us. It was small, black, about the size of 2 matchboxes stacked together. A short wire looped out of one end. I stared at it. "I've never seen that before," I said. The agent tilted his head. "This device was inside your bag. I didn't put it there." He did not react to that. He just nodded and said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay right here." My chest felt tight, like someone had pulled a strap across it. "Is this a joke?" I asked. "I'm late for a flight." "This won't take long," he said. That was the first lie. They asked me to empty my pockets, wallet, keys, phone. I laid everything out neatly, the way I always did when I was nervous, like order could protect me. People walked past us, a woman in heels dragging a suitcase, a man talking too loudly into his phone. No one stopped. No one looked for long. Lily stood up and came closer to me. She held onto my leg with both hands. "Daddy," she whispered. "Are we in trouble?" "No," I said immediately. "Too fast. This is just a mistake." The agent with the gloves asked me where I worked. I told him. He asked how often I flew. I told him. He asked if I had ever handled electronic components. I told him yes. Every day. He wrote something down on a clipboard. Then he said, "Sir, we've received a report." "A report from who?" He did not answer that either. Another agent approached from behind and stood close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. I had not noticed him walk up. "Is there anyone traveling with you?" the first agent asked. "My daughter." He glanced down at Lily, then looked back at me. His eyes were flat. "I'm going to need you to follow us." "Where?" "To a secondary screening area." I looked at the clock again. 6:34 a.m. If I missed boarding, I would not make it to the site before dark. If I did not make it before dark, the turbine would stay offline another day. If it stayed offline, the penalty clause would trigger. And when that happened, they always cut someone loose. I thought of the email from HR. Subject line in all caps. Final notice. Can she come with me? I asked. She can wait here, he said. Lily tightened her grip on my leg. No, I said. My voice cracked on the word. She stays with me. The agent hesitated. Then he nodded once. We walked. The room they took us to was small and white and colder than the terminal. A metal table, 2 chairs bolted to the floor, a camera in the corner with a red light that did not blink. They asked me to sit. I did. Lily sat on my lap, her head pressed against my chest. I could feel her heart beating fast. One agent left the room. Another stood by the door. The one with the clipboard looked at me again. Do you know why someone might place a restricted device in your bag? No, I said. I don't have enemies. I fix wind turbines. He wrote something down. Is there anyone who had access to your belongings this morning? I thought about my kitchen, the table, my jacket on the chair. I thought about my brother Mark. He had driven us to the airport before dawn. Said it made sense since he was already up. He worked in project management for the same energy company. A higher floor, better pay, cleaner hands. He hugged Lily goodbye in the drop-off lane. He clapped me on the shoulder and told me to text when I landed. He was probably still here. In the terminal, waiting for his own flight. My brother? I said. But he wouldn't. The agent stopped writing. Your brother's name? I told him. Something shifted in the room. Not loud, not obvious, just a tightening, like air pressure changing. The agent closed the clipboard. We're going to need to make some calls, he said. How long is this going to take? He did not answer. Lily lifted her head and looked at me. Her eyes were shiny but dry. You promised, she said quietly. I held her tighter. I know, I said. Through the narrow window in the door, I saw a familiar figure pass by. Tall, gray jacket. Head down, scrolling on his phone. Mark did not look toward the room. He did not slow down. He walked past like nothing in the world was happening. I watched him disappear into the crowd. That was when I understood something was wrong. Not airport wrong. Not paperwork wrong. Something deeper. Something that had been set in motion long before this morning. I did not know how yet. But sitting in that cold white room, with my daughter on my lap and my job slipping away by the minute, I felt it settle into my bones. Everything I thought I knew about my life was about to collapse. When people ask me later why I did not fight harder in that room, why I did not raise my voice or demand a lawyer or start shouting that everything was wrong, I never know how to answer them in a single sentence. The truth is simpler and uglier. I had spent my whole life learning how to stay quiet. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house outside Odessa, the kind with thin walls and a porch that sagged a little in the middle. My father worked oil rigs until his back gave out. My mother cleaned offices at night. Noise meant trouble in our house. Noise meant someone was about to lose control or something was about to break. So I learned early that silence was safer. If my father came home angry, I stayed in my room. If the electricity bill was late, I pretended I did not notice the lights flicker. When my parents argued, I put my hands over my ears and counted breaths until it stopped. By the time I was 12, I knew how to make myself small without anyone asking. Mark was different. Mark was 3 years older, taller, louder. He learned early that talking got you places. Teachers liked him. Coaches listened to him. When he raised his hand, people turned their heads. I followed him like a shadow. If Mark got praised, I stayed quiet and felt proud anyway. If Mark got in trouble, I stood behind him and waited for it to pass. We learned our roles without ever naming them. After high school, Mark went to college, business administration. I went to trade school. Wind energy was just starting to grow, and they said it was steady work. I liked the idea of fixing things high above the ground, where the noise of the world fell away and all that mattered was torque and balance and the sound of the wind. Mark liked air-conditioned offices and meetings with glass walls. When our mother died, Mark handled the paperwork. When our father moved into assisted living, Mark chose the place. I signed where he pointed. It felt easier that way. I told myself this was just how families worked. Later, when Lily was born, I told myself the same thing. Her mother left when Lily was 2. No fight, no note, just gone. One morning there was a suitcase missing and an empty side of the bed. I did not chase her. I did not ask why. I learned long ago that unanswered questions were lighter than the truth. Mark stepped in then, too. He helped me find a better apartment. He introduced me to people at his company. He made sure my name ended up on the list for overseas certification. When I thanked him, he smiled and said family took care of family. I believed him. In that white room at the airport, with Lily curled against me, all those years pressed down at once. Every time I had stepped back, every time I had trusted someone else to handle things. The agent came back after what felt like hours, but could not have been more than 15 minutes. He carried a tablet now. "We are still waiting on confirmation," he said. "Confirmation of what?" I asked. "Of the report." My phone buzzed in my pocket. They had let me keep it. I pulled it out without thinking. One new message. From Mark. "Are you through security yet?" I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "No. Something is wrong." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. "What do you mean wrong?" I looked up at the agent. He was watching me now, his eyes following the movement of my hands. I typed, "They found something in my bag." There was a long pause before Mark replied. "What kind of something?" I swallowed. "I do not know. Some device." Another pause. "Where are you now?" "Secondary screening." The typing dots stayed on the screen longer this time. That happens sometimes. "Just stay calm. They will sort it out." I read the message twice. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like Mark. Smooth, confident, like someone who had never been afraid of a locked door. I typed, "Can you come over here?" There was no answer. Minutes passed. Lily shifted on my lap. She had fallen asleep with her cheek pressed into my jacket. I stroked her hair slowly, the same way I used to when she was a baby, and nothing else would calm her down. The agent cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, "we are going to need to ask you some more questions." "Am I being detained?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just for a second. You are not free to leave at this time." My stomach dropped. "What about my daughter?" "She will need to wait with you." The words settled between us like a weight. They asked me again about my work. They asked me to describe my last 3 job sites. They asked me if I knew anyone who had access to restricted components. Each question felt like a test I did not know how to study for. Between answers, my phone buzzed again. From Mark. "I'm boarding soon. Call me later." I stared at that message longer than the others. Boarding. He was leaving. I thought of him walking past the door earlier, eyes glued to his phone. I had assumed he was distracted, busy, important. Now the memory shifted. He had not looked surprised. He had not even slowed down. The agent asked another question, but I did not hear it. My ears rang softly, like the wind inside a turbine tower. I had built my life on the idea that if I stayed useful and stayed quiet, nothing truly bad would happen to me. I fixed machines. I showed up on time. I paid my bills. I kept my head down. But sitting there, with Lily asleep and my brother boarding a plane, I felt something crack inside that belief. It was not anger yet. It was confusion, the kind that makes your hands cold. "What happens next?" I asked. The agent looked at me for a long moment. "That depends," he said, "on what we find." I nodded. I had nodded my whole life. But this time, as the minutes ticked past and my job slipped further out of reach, I made myself a quiet promise. If I got out of this room, I was done being the person things happened to. I did not know how I would keep that promise. I only knew I could not afford to break it. Not anymore. They released me just after noon. No apology. No explanation that made sense. One agent handed me my backpack like it was nothing more than a misplaced coat. Another told me I was free to go and reminded me to collect my belongings. The small black device was gone. No one mentioned it again. By then, my flight had left hours ago. Lily was groggy and confused, her head heavy on my shoulder as we walked back into the terminal. The place felt louder than before. Every announcement grated on my nerves. Every rolling suitcase sounded too sharp. I checked my phone. 7 missed calls from work, 3 voicemails. I did not need to listen to them to know what they said. Still, I did. The first was from my supervisor, clipped and professional, asking me to call back immediately. The second was shorter. "We had reassigned the deployment. We will discuss next steps." The third was from HR. Ethan, this is regarding your repeated failure to meet deployment obligations. Please be aware that your access credentials have been temporarily suspended pending review. Temporarily. I stood there in the middle of the terminal, Lily half asleep in my arms, and felt the ground tilt slightly under my feet. I called Mark. Straight to voicemail. I sent him a message. They let me go. Missed the flight. No reply. Outside, the Texas heat hit us like a wall. The parking lot shimmered. I buckled Lily into the back seat of my old truck and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. For a long moment, I just stared at my hands. They were steady. They had always been steady. That was my job. Torque values, safety checks, steady hands kept people alive. I drove home in silence. The apartment felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, too empty. Lily kicked off her shoes and went straight to her room without saying a word. She closed the door gently, like she was afraid of making noise. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. My work email login failed. I tried again. Same message. Access denied. A notification popped up instead. Internal compliance review initiated. My name sat there in black letters on a white screen, stripped of everything else I had built around it. By evening, the rumors had started. Mrs. Delgado from next door knocked to return a package that had been left at her door by mistake. She hesitated before handing it to me, her smile stiff. "You doing okay?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. "Fine," I said automatically. She nodded, then leaned in slightly. "They were talking about you at the bus stop." "Talking about what?" She straightened up. "Never mind." She left quickly. The next morning, Lily did not want to go to school. "My teacher was asking questions yesterday," she said, staring at her cereal. "What kind of questions?" "Why we were at the airport all day, why a policeman talked to you." I froze. "There was no policeman," I said. She shrugged. "That is what the kids said. At school drop-off, the looks followed me. Not open hostility, just distance. Conversation stopping mid-sentence. A mother pulling her child a little closer when I walked past. By noon, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This is compliance. Please confirm your availability for an interview tomorrow morning. I replied yes before I could think. That afternoon, I drove to Mark's place. He lived in a gated complex on the north side of the city. Clean sidewalks, identical mailboxes, everything trimmed and orderly. I had helped him move in a year ago, carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs while he took calls on his headset. His car was in the parking lot. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I called him. Voicemail. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the hum of traffic beyond the walls, before finally turning back to my truck. On the way home, I passed a billboard advertising clean energy, smiling faces, blue skies, powering the future together. I laughed once, sharp and short, before the sound died in my throat. That night, after Lily was asleep, I opened my laptop again. I did not log into my work account. I did not need to. I went through my personal files, maintenance reports, sensor data backups, logs I kept out of habit, not policy. I liked redundancy. Machines failed when people trusted single points of truth. As I scrolled, something caught my eye. A timestamp. A maintenance log from 3 weeks ago, edited under my name while I was on a different site entirely. The edit was small. A parameter change buried deep in a subfile, the kind of thing no one noticed unless they were looking for it. My pulse picked up. I checked another file, then another. The same pattern, minor changes, my name, times I was not there. I leaned back in my chair, the kitchen light buzzing overhead. This was not an accident. This was not airport security being overcautious. Someone had been using my credentials, and they had done it carefully. Slowly, over time, I thought of Mark again. His job, his access level, his calm messages telling me to stay patient. Family takes care of family. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. For the first time since the airport, something sharper than confusion settled in my chest. Not anger, recognition. Whatever was happening to me was not random, and whoever had started it knew me well enough to bet that I would stay quiet. They were wrong. I did not know yet how I would prove it. But as I sat there, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of cars on the highway, I understood one thing with perfect clarity. My name was being erased while I was still alive, and I was done watching it happen. The compliance interview was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning, downtown, in a building I had only ever seen from the outside. Glass and steel. Reflective windows. The kind of place where you had to check in at a desk even if you knew exactly where you were going. I dropped Lily off at school early. She hugged me tighter than usual before getting out of the truck. "Are you coming back later?" she asked. "Yes," I said. I needed that to be true. She nodded, then paused. "Uncle Mark said he might take me for ice cream this weekend." The words landed harder than they should have. "That sounds nice," I said carefully. She smiled and ran toward the building. I sat there for a moment after she disappeared inside, my hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Mark had not returned my calls. He had not answered my messages, and yet he was still talking to my daughter. At the compliance office, a woman in a gray blazer met me at the reception desk. She introduced herself as Karen. She did not offer her last name. She led me into a conference room with no windows, just a long table, 4 chairs, and a speakerphone in the center. A folder sat in front of the chair she indicated I should take. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to remind you that this is an internal review." "I understand," I said. She smiled faintly. "This is for your protection as much as ours." I had heard that line before. Another man entered the room. Older, balding. He carried a tablet and nodded once at me before sitting down. They started with easy questions. Dates, job sites, certifications. I answered them without hesitation. Then they opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots of maintenance logs, my name, my employee number, highlighted sections. "Can you explain this adjustment?" Karen asked, sliding one page toward me. I looked at it. "I did not make that change," I said. She tilted her head. "The log shows your credentials. Detated front." "Yes," I said, "but I was not there that day." The older man tapped his tablet. "According to our records, your badge was not scanned on site." "I know," I said. "That is why I keep personal backups." Karen's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You keep personal backups of company data." "Sensor logs," I said. "For troubleshooting. It is not restricted." She made a note. "Do you suspect anyone else may have accessed your credentials?" she asked. I hesitated. This was the moment. The one where silence had always been easier. "My brother," I said. They both looked up. "Mark Miller," I continued. "He works in project management. He had access to my workstation during the Aurora rollout." Karen's pen paused. "And why would he do this?" she asked. I shook my head. "I do not know yet." The older man leaned back in his chair. "Are you accusing him?" "No," I said. "I am stating a possibility." The interview ended an hour later with no conclusions, no reassurance, just more waiting. As I stood to leave, Karen stopped me. "For the record," she said, lowering her voice, "it would be better for everyone if this turns out to be a technical misunderstanding." I nodded. Outside, my phone buzzed. A message from Mark. "Sorry, I have been hard to reach. Crazy few days. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. "You walked past me at the airport," I typed. "Why did you not stop?" Several minutes passed. "I was in meetings," he replied. Did not realize it was that serious. I read the message twice. Then I typed. "They questioned me for 6 hours. I lost my job." This time, the reply came quickly. "Ethan, you need to calm down. This is exactly why I told you not to panic." Something in me snapped at that word. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. That afternoon, I went home and opened my laptop again. I did not look at work files this time. I opened an old external drive I kept in a drawer. One Mark had given me years ago, back when he helped me organize my digital life. I plugged it in. The folder structure was familiar. Too familiar. Inside were archived emails I did not remember saving, old drafts, meeting notes, and then I found it. A shared credentials file. My username. My access keys. Last modified date. 3 months ago. Modified by Mark. My hands went cold. I scrolled further. A project timeline document. Not mine. Mark's, with a section highlighted in yellow. Risk mitigation through controlled incident. Under it, a line that made my stomach turn. Assign field accountability to technician with highest exposure and lowest resistance. My name was not written there, but it did not need to be. I closed the file and sat back, breathing slowly. This was not about a single mistake, or even about me. This was about something larger. Financial pressure, deadlines, contracts that needed an incident to be triggered, just enough to justify adjustments and payouts. And I was the easiest variable. That evening, Mark finally called. "Hey," he said, like nothing was wrong. "I hear compliance talk to you." "Yes," I said. "Good," he replied. "That means it is moving." "You put my credentials on your system," I said. Silence. "Ethan," he said carefully, "you do not understand how complicated these projects are." "You framed me," I said. "No," he said. "I managed risk." I laughed. I could not stop myself. "You let airport security think I was a threat," I said. "You let my daughter watch that." He exhaled. "You are overreacting." That word again. "I needed someone who would not fight back," he continued. "Someone compliance would believe was careless, not malicious. You are good at your job, but you are not political. That is not an insult. It is just reality." I closed my eyes. "Family takes care of family," he added. "Yes," I said quietly. "That is what you told me." "Ethan," he said, his voice softening, "this will blow over. I will make sure of it. You just need to stop digging." I ended the call. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until morning, the laptop open in front of me, piecing together timelines, cross-referencing logs, mapping access points. By dawn, I had something close to the truth, and with it came a new understanding. Mark was not avoiding me because he was busy. He was avoiding me because he thought I would do what I always did: stay quiet, protect the family, disappear if necessary. As the sun rose and light crept across the floor, I made another promise to myself. I would not confront him again. I would not warn him, and I would not rush. Whatever he had built, using my silence, I would let him finish it. Then I would show everyone exactly how it worked. Once you see the pattern, it becomes impossible to unsee it. For years, I had thought of my job as a straight line. You showed up, fixed what was broken, filled out the reports, went home. Cause and effect. Honest work. But when I started laying everything out on the table, literally and figuratively, that straight line bent into something else entirely. A curve. I printed what I could: timelines, log edits, badge access records I had quietly saved months ago without knowing why. I spread them across the kitchen table, pushing aside Lily's homework and an unopened stack of bills. The room smelled faintly of cold coffee and dust. The first thing that stood out was the timing. Every altered log entry happened within a narrow window: late nights, early mornings, hours when no one expected a field technician to be alert enough to notice small discrepancies. And every time, the change aligned with a pressure point in the project schedule. A delivery deadline. A performance milestone. A penalty clause hovering just close enough to make executives nervous. These were not random edits. They were nudges. Small, precise pushes designed to make a system wobble without toppling. Enough to justify emergency meetings. Enough to unlock contingency funds. Enough to move money quietly, legally, and fast. And always, the name attached to the work was mine. I opened Mark's project timeline again. The phrase from the highlighted section echoed in my head. Controlled incident. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, letting the meaning sink in. A controlled incident was not a failure. It was a tool. Something you planned, contained, and profited from. And for a controlled incident, you needed someone on the ground to absorb the blame. Someone reliable. Someone predictable. Someone who would not scream when the walls closed in. Someone like me. The airport device made sense now. It was not meant to get me arrested. Not really. It was meant to delay me, to keep me off site at a critical moment, to create a gap in coverage that could be documented and exploited. If the turbine failed while I was stuck in security, the narrative would write itself. Technician missed deployment, oversight occurred, system instability followed. Clean, simple, believable. I closed my eyes and pictured Lily sitting on the airport floor, counting tiles while strangers searched my bag. The thought made my jaw tighten. That afternoon, I received another email from compliance. We require additional clarification regarding your personal data storage practices. I did not respond right away. Instead, I drove. I took Lily to a friend's house for the evening. I told her I had a meeting. She did not argue. She had learned, too quickly, how to read the air around adults. From there, I drove to a place I had not visited in years, the wind farm. It sat an hour outside the city, rows of white towers rising from flat land like something unreal. The road in was narrow and cracked, the kind of road that punished you for driving too fast. I parked near the perimeter fence and sat in my truck, watching the blades turn slowly against the sky. I was not authorized to be there anymore. My credentials were suspended, but I did not need access to know what I was looking at. I pulled out my phone and opened a local weather archive. Wind speeds, direction changes, load stress data, publicly available information if you knew where to look. Then I compared it to the altered logs. There it was. The same adjustment. Over and over. A tiny tolerance shift that increased strain during specific wind conditions. Not enough to cause immediate failure. Enough to accelerate wear. Someone had been aging the machines on purpose. And when the damage finally crossed a threshold, it would look like negligence. Mine. I sat there until the sun dipped low and the towers cast long shadows across the field. The wind picked up slightly, and the blades began to spin faster. I imagined the forces at work inside the nacelles, the vibrations invisible to the naked eye. I knew those machines. I had trusted them. I had trusted my brother. On the drive home, my phone rang. Mark's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. He called again. Then again. I answered on the fourth ring. "You are not answering emails," he said, irritation creeping into his voice. "I have been busy," I replied. "Compliance is asking questions you do not need to invite," he said. "You are making this harder than it has to be." "I went to the site," I said. Silence. "You are not authorized," he said finally. "I did not touch anything," I said. I looked. "That was a mistake," he said. "No," I said. "The mistake was thinking you would stop at paperwork." He sea-hilled. "You are emotional right now." That word again. "I know about the tolerance shifts," I said. "I know what controlled incident means." The line stayed quiet for a long second, longer than before. Then Mark laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not mocking, almost fond. "You always were good with details," he said. "That is why this worked." I closed my eyes. "You think this makes you smart," I said. "Using me like this." "I think it makes me effective," he replied. "You want to know the truth, Ethan? The company would have chewed you up eventually anyway. You were a liability. Too honest. Too manual. I gave your career a purpose." "You destroyed it," I said. "I redirected it," he said. "You took the hit so the project could survive, so people could keep their jobs, including yours, eventually, if you had stayed quiet." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. "And Lily," I said. "Was that part of the plan too?" "It's severed." He did not answer immediately. "That was unfortunate," he said at last. "But temporary. Temporary." I ended the call without another word. That night, I sat alone at the table again, the papers spread out in front of me. But this time, I was not trying to understand what had happened. I was deciding what kind of person I was going to be next. I could take everything I had and hand it to compliance, burn the whole thing down, drag Mark with me into the wreckage, expose every compromised project, every quiet payout. It would be justified. It would be righteous, and it would destroy more than just him. I thought of the technicians I knew, the ones with bad knees and mortgages and kids in college, the ones who trusted the system because they had no choice. I thought of Lily, asleep in someone else's house, believing her uncle loved her. The truth sat heavy in my chest. This was not just about revenge, it was about control. Mark believed he controlled the board, the data, the narrative. What he did not understand was this. The person who fixes machines understands something managers never do. Systems do not fail all at once. They fail because of one small change applied at the wrong time. And I knew exactly where to apply it. I closed the laptop. Tomorrow, I would respond to compliance. Not with accusations, not with confessions, with cooperation. I would let them keep asking the wrong questions. I would let Mark believe I was still confused, still scared, still manageable. And while he watched the big picture, I would focus on the smallest details, the kind that decide whether a system holds or collapses. The morning I answered compliance, I did it from the same kitchen table where I had signed Lily's kindergarten forms and paid overdue bills. Nothing about the room had changed. The same chipped mug, the same hum from the refrigerator. But I did not accuse anyone. I did not mention Mark's name again. I did not attach the files that burned a hole in my laptop. Instead, I wrote carefully. I acknowledged the discrepancies. I admitted that some of my personal backup practices could be misinterpreted. I offered to walk them through my workflow step by step, starting from my earliest assignments. The email was polite, cooperative, boring. Within an hour, they replied, "Thank you for your transparency. We appreciate your willingness to assist." I could almost hear Mark's relieved exhale through the wires. That afternoon, he called me again. "I heard you handled compliance well," he said. "That was smart. Age." End quote. "I am trying to be helpful," I replied. "That is good," he said. "This is how it goes away." As if what had happened at the airport, in front of my daughter, was a stain you could wipe off with the right tone of voice. "Listen," he continued, "there is a project review next week. Senior people, auditors. They are nervous. If you keep your head down for a bit, I can make sure your name comes out clean on the other side." "And my job?" I asked. A pause. "We will see," he said. "Let us not rush." I agreed. Out loud. Inside, something hardened. Over the next few days, I became exactly what Mark expected. I answered emails promptly. I joined video calls without complaint. I apologized when asked to clarify things I had already explained 3 times. I thanked people for their patience. At night, after Lily was asleep, I worked. Not on exposure. Not on confrontation. On preparation. I mapped the system Mark was leaning on, the approvals, the dependencies, the shortcuts that only existed because everyone assumed someone else was paying attention. He had designed his scheme to be invisible to oversight, but he had overlooked one thing. He assumed the person at the bottom would never be allowed to touch the system again. He was wrong. 2 days after my compliance interview, I received a temporary credential reinstatement. Limited access. Read only. Officially. In practice, read only still told me everything I needed. I watched the project metrics shift in real time. I watched tolerance, values dance, just inside acceptable ranges. I watched alerts get acknowledged and cleared within minutes by accounts that were not supposed to be active. I watched Mark's fingerprints everywhere. On Friday afternoon, he sent me a message. "Good news! The board approved an accelerated stabilization plan. If this works, we all come out looking good." All. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. "What do you need from me?" I typed. He replied almost instantly. "Nothing. Just stay available. And do not change anything." That sentence confirmed everything. The stabilization plan was not meant to stabilize. It was meant to trigger. A controlled incident needed one last push, one that could be blamed on a technician who had already been flagged. Me. That night, I went back to the external drive. Not to look for more proof, but to make a copy of something else. A configuration profile Mark had created months ago, tucked inside a folder labeled obsolete. It governed automated responses when stress thresholds were crossed. In plain language, it told the system how to lie politely. I did not alter it. I duplicated it. Then I made one small adjustment. Not to a tolerance value, not to a limit, to a timestamp dependency. I changed when the system would stop correcting itself, just by a few seconds. Enough to be invisible in a meeting, enough to matter in the wind. Saturday morning, I took Lily to the park. She ran ahead of me, her laughter cutting through the quiet air. Parents sat on benches, scrolling through phones. Dogs chased tennis balls. Life went on, untouched by turbines and contracts. "Are you still in trouble?" Lily asked suddenly, swinging from the monkey bars. I thought about lying. "No," I said. "Not like before." She nodded, satisfied, and jumped down. I watched her for a long time, committing the image to memory. The way her hair stuck to her forehead, the scuff on her shoe. This was what Mark had called unfortunate but temporary. On Monday, the wind picked up. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger alarms on its own, but enough, paired with the accelerated aging Mark had engineered, to push the system toward the edge he wanted. At 10:14 a.m., an alert fired. At 10:14 and 5 seconds, the automated correction kicked in. At 10:14 and 8 seconds, it stopped. The vibration exceeded tolerance. A turbine shut down. Not catastrophically, safely, exactly as it was designed to. But the shutdown cascaded. 3 more followed. By noon, the site was offline. The stabilization plan failed. Phones started ringing. Mark called me twice. I did not answer. At 1 p.m., a company-wide email went out. Unexpected system response under investigation. No injuries reported. Regulatory review initiated. At 1016 m. My phone buzzed again. From Mark. "What did you do?" I stared at the screen. Then I replied, "I followed procedures." His call came through immediately. "You touched the system," he said. "No pretense now. No patience. You promised you would not change anything." "I did not change the tolerances," I said calmly. "I did not override safeguards. I did not violate any protocol." "You sabotaged it," he hissed. "No," I said. "I let it behave honestly." Silence crackled on the line. "They are going to audit everything," he said finally. "Every incident, every adjustment." "Yes," I said. "You will go down with me," he said. "Do you understand that?" I thought of the files on my laptop, the backups, the copied profiles. "No," I said. "I will not." "You think this makes you better," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "You think this fixes anything." "I think it stops," I replied. He laughed, a raw, broken sound. "You always wanted to be right," he said. "No," I said. "I wanted to be safe." I ended the call. By evening, news vans were parked outside the corporate office downtown. Not for a scandal, for a review. Clean energy under scrutiny. Safety first. The board suspended the project pending investigation. Mark was removed from active management pending outcome. He did not go to jail. Not yet. I did not send my evidence to compliance. Not yet. That was the twist Mark would never understand. I was not trying to destroy him. I was removing his ability to keep doing this. Without the controlled incidents, without the quiet pressure points, his value vanished. His schemes required speed and silence. Audits brought neither. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at the table again. The same table, but this time, the weight in my chest was different. He had taught me to stay quiet. He had taught me to be useful. What he never taught me was how to stop. I had learned that on my own, and it was enough. The investigation did not arrive with sirens or shouted accusations. It came quietly, the way real consequences always do. On Tuesday morning, I received a calendar invite titled Technical Review Session, Mandatory Attendance. The sender was an address I had never seen before, a third-party auditing firm contracted by the board. No emojis, no soft language, just a time, a place, and a list of documents to prepare. I printed everything, not the files that would end Mark's career, not the ones that proved intent. I printed the boring things: sensor outputs, environmental data, maintenance procedures, the things that only mattered if you knew how machines actually behaved. I dressed plainly: jeans, work boots, a clean shirt with no company logo. I wanted to look like what I was: a technician. The review room was larger than the compliance office, windows this time. A long table with microphones spaced evenly along its length, bottled water lined up like props. Mark was already there when I arrived. He did not look at me. He sat 2 seats down, shoulders tense, flipping through a stack of papers with exaggerated calm. He had shaved closer than usual. His tie was perfectly straight. Across from us sat 3 auditors, 2 men, 1 woman, all of them older than me, all of them watching without giving anything away. The woman at the center spoke first. "We are here to understand a sequence of technical decisions," she said, "not to assign blame." It sighed. I almost smiled. They started with Mark. He spoke confidently, walking them through the stabilization plan, the market pressures, the unexpected variables. He used phrases like industry standard and acceptable risk. He said the word transparency so many times, it began to lose meaning. When he finished, they turned to me. "Mr. Miller," the woman said, "you are a field technician. Help us understand what the system did." I leaned forward. I talked about wind. I talked about stress and fatigue and how machines remembered every small insult you gave them. I talked about how automated corrections worked, not in theory, but in practice. I explained why the shutdown had been safe, predictable, and overdue. I did not raise my voice. I did not mention sabotage. I let the data speak in the language it was designed to use. The auditors asked questions, specific ones. I answered carefully, always pointing back to documentation, always inside the rules. At one point, the woman glanced at Mark. "Who approved the accelerated aging adjustments?" she asked. Mark cleared his throat. "That was within my authority. And the airport delay," she added, almost casually, "was that related?" Mark stiffened. "That is not relevant," he said. "It delayed the technician," she replied, "which delayed deployment, which factored into the incident timeline." I kept my eyes on the table. Mark shook his head. "That was a misunderstanding. Security overreaction." She nodded slowly. "We will verify." The meeting lasted 3 hours. When it ended, no one shook hands. Mark stood abruptly and left without a word. I stayed seated until the room was nearly empty. Outside, my phone buzzed. From Mark. "You think you won?" I did not reply. That evening, Lily asked if Uncle Mark was coming over for dinner like he used to. "No," I said. "Is he mad at you?" she asked. I considered my answer carefully. "He made some bad choices," I said. "And now people are looking at them." She nodded, accepting that in the way children accept things adults say when they do not have the words yet. Later that night, an email arrived from HR. "Your employment status has been updated. Access reinstated pending reassignment." Pending reassignment. I stared at the phrase for a long time. Mark texted again. "You could still fix this. You have the proof. You know what I mean. If you hand it over, they will come after me harder. After the whole team, after everyone." I typed back slowly. "That is exactly why I am not doing it." Several minutes passed. Then his reply came. "You are not protecting them. You are protecting yourself." I read that sentence again and again. For the first time, it did not sting, because it was partly true. The next week was a blur of meetings and quiet changes. The project remained suspended. The board announced a full safety review across all sites. The phrase "controlled incident" began appearing in internal emails, always framed as a failure of oversight. Mark was placed on administrative leave. Not fired, not charged, just removed from motion. People started asking me questions. Not the auditors. The technicians. They called late at night. They asked about the rumors, about whether it was safe to speak, about whether the system had been lying to them too. I told them the truth. "Machines do not lie," I said. "People do." One evening, Mark showed up at my door. I had not told him where I lived. He had never visited before, but he stood there now, shoulders slumped, tie loosened, eyes red. "I just want to talk," he said. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "You always wanted to be the good one," he said. "The honest one, but you do not understand what this costs." "I understand exactly what it costs," I said. "It cost me my job, my reputation, Lily's sense of safety." He looked away. "They will bury this," he said. "They always do. And then it will start again. Maybe not with me, with someone else." "Not the same way," I said. He laughed bitterly. "You really believe that?" "I believe audits slow things down," I said. "I believe people behave differently when the lights stay on." He shook his head. "You could end this now." "Yes," I said. "I could." Where carded the scapes? We stood there in silence, the sound of traffic drifting up from the street. Finally, he spoke again. "You were always better at fixing things than breaking them," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "This is me fixing something," I said. He left without another word. That night, I opened my laptop and looked at the files one last time. The evidence that could end Mark completely sat there, unchanged. I did not delete it. I did not send it. I stored it where I knew it would remain safe. Because I had learned something Mark never had. Power was not just the ability to destroy. It was the ability to decide when not to. And for the first time in my life, that decision was mine. Silence can be louder than confrontation. In the weeks after the review, nothing dramatic happened on the surface. No headlines, no arrests, no sudden firings that people could point to and say, "There, that is justice." The company released a carefully worded statement about enhanced safety oversight and renewed commitment to transparency. The turbines stayed still, waiting for permission to breathe again. Inside, everything shifted. Meetings multiplied. Emails grew longer. Every decision now needed 3 signatures instead of 1. Engineers who had never left their desks were suddenly asking field technicians for opinions. The system slowed down, grinding against its own caution. That was the point. I was reassigned to a different region, officially to support remediation, unofficially to keep me close but contained. I did not argue. I showed up. I did the work I was asked to do. Nothing more and nothing less. Mark disappeared from my daily life. No calls. No messages. His name stopped appearing on internal threads. When it did come up, it was always followed by phrases like pending review or under consideration. He had become a problem no one wanted to touch directly. One afternoon, while Lily was at school, I sat in my truck outside a grocery store and watched people move in and out through automatic doors. Ordinary things felt sharper now. The way a man held the door for a stranger. The way a child cried because her balloon slipped from her hand. For a long time, I had believed strength meant absorbing pressure quietly. Now I understood it meant choosing where to apply it. The auditors called me again, this time privately. Not a meeting, a phone call. "We have additional questions," the woman said. "Off the record." I knew what that meant. She did not ask about Mark. She asked about systems, about incentives, about whether I believed the company had known what it was doing. "I believe people knew enough to look away," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "And if we push further," she asked, "what breaks?" "More than just the people who deserve it," I replied. Another pause. "We suspected as much," she said. When the call ended, I sat there with my phone in my hand, feeling the weight of what I had just done. I had confirmed her doubts without handing her a weapon. It was not heroic. It was careful. That night, Lily brought home a drawing from school. Stick figures, a windmill, 2 people holding hands. "This is you and me," she said, pointing. "And this is your job." I smiled and taped it to the refrigerator. "You are not gone as much now," she added. I like that. So did I. A month later, the board announced structural changes. Project managers would no longer control both schedules and risk mitigation. Access credentials were restructured. Field technicians were given independent reporting channels. On paper, it looked like progress. Mark resigned quietly a week after that. No farewell email. No explanation. Just gone. I heard through someone else that he had accepted a consulting role overseas. Temporary, lucrative, far from audits. When Lily told me Uncle Mark had called to say goodbye, my chest tightened. "What did he say?" I asked. "He said he was proud of you," she replied, "and that he would send postcards." I sighed. I nodded. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I took out the external drive again. I stared at the folder containing the final proof, the file that would have closed every door for Mark forever, the one he had begged me not to use. I thought about sending it anonymously, letting the system eat one of its own for once. I also thought about what would follow: lawyers, counterclaims, quiet settlements, another cycle of blame that ended with nothing truly changing. I unplugged the drive and put it back in the drawer. This was the twist no one expected, least of all Mark. I was not interested in watching him fall. I was interested in making sure he could not rise the same way again. The next time the turbines turned, I was there. Not climbing, not repairing, observing. The blades cut through the air cleanly, steady, and true. The system corrected itself smoothly, honestly, without hidden hands pushing it toward failure. For the first time in months, my shoulders relaxed. On the drive home, I passed the same billboard I had laughed at before, powering the future together. This time, I did not laugh. I understood the lie behind it, but I also understood something else. Systems could be changed, not by tearing them apart, but by forcing them to operate in the open. That was the kind of revenge that did not look like revenge at all. It looked like restraint. And restraint, I had learned, was something Mark never understood. At home, Lily was waiting for me at the door. "Did you fix it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I think I did." She smiled, satisfied with that answer, and went back to her room. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the quiet hum of the city outside. Cars passing, a dog barking, life continuing. I knew this story was not over. Systems rarely changed all at once. People found new ways to bend rules, new ways to hide. But I also knew this. I was no longer the easiest variable. I was no longer the one who stayed quiet and waited for things to pass. I had learned how to stand inside a system and make it tell the truth. And once you do that, even silence becomes a weapon. One I knew exactly how to use. The public part of the reckoning arrived on a Thursday morning, wrapped in polite language and pressed suits. The board called it a stakeholder briefing. Investors, regulators, a few members of the press, the kind of event where nothing was supposed to happen except reassurance. I was not invited at first. Then, the night before, an email arrived. Technical witness requested. Attendance mandatory. I read it twice, then closed the laptop and went to check on Lily. She was asleep on her stomach, one arm flung over a stuffed dog she had owned since she was 3. I stood there longer than necessary, listening to her breathe. In the morning, I dropped her off at school and drove downtown. The building looked different now. Security tighter, badges checked twice, everyone moving with the stiff politeness of people who knew they were being watched. The auditorium was half full when I arrived. A long table at the front, microphones, water glasses untouched, a large screen behind it displaying the company logo and the words "Safety Review Update." Mark was not there. I noticed that immediately. In his place sat a man I had never met, introduced as interim project oversight. He looked nervous, the way people do when they inherit problems without context. The briefing began with numbers, charts, carefully chosen phrases, enhanced oversight, proactive measures, lessons learned. I sat in the second row, hands folded, listening. Then the regulator spoke. "We have requested a demonstration of system behavior under recent operating conditions," she said, "to be presented by a field representative." All eyes turned toward me. I walked to the front slowly, aware of the microphones, the cameras, the low murmur of the room. My heart was steady, not calm, steady. I did not speak at first. I connected my laptop to the screen. The display changed from slides to raw data. "This is a turbine," I said finally. "Not a metaphor, a machine." A few people shifted in their seats. I pointed to the graph. "This line shows vibration over time. This dip here is when automated correction engages. This is normal. This is safety." I clicked again. "This is what happens when correction is delayed. Not disabled, delayed." The line spiked. Murmurs rippled through the room. "No explosion," I continued. "No dramatic failure. Just accumulated stress. Quiet damage." I clicked again. And this, I said, is the record of who authorized the parameters that made that delay possible. I did not say Mark's name. I did not have to. The interim oversight man cleared his throat. These authorizations were within scope at the time, he said. Within scope, I repeated, but not within reality. A reporter raised her hand. Are you saying this was intentional? She asked. I paused. This was the edge, the moment where a single word could turn restraint into accusation. I am saying, I replied carefully, that the system was encouraged to fail quietly. The regulator leaned forward. And who benefited? She asked. I looked at the table, at the empty chair where Mark should have been. Projects under pressure benefit from incidents that justify changes, I said. Budgets, timelines, accountability. Silence filled the room. When the briefing ended, there was no applause, just whispered conversations and hurried exits. Outside, reporters clustered near the doors. Microphones appeared. Questions overlapped. Did you expose corruption today? Is anyone going to jail? Was this about personal retaliation? I stopped walking and turned back once. This was about stopping a pattern, I said, not punishing a person. Then I left. By evening, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Former coworkers, journalists, unknown numbers. One message stood out. From Mark. I saw the live stream. I did not reply. Another message followed. You protected me. I stared at the words, feeling something twist in my chest. I did not respond to that either. The next day, the company announced further changes. Independent safety offices, external reporting lines, public transparency commitments. The stock dipped slightly, then stabilized. Life went on. A week later, I received a formal letter. Position reassigned. Senior Field Integrity Advisor. No raise worth mentioning. No corner office. But autonomy. I folded the letter and set it aside. That evening, I took Lily out for ice cream. She got chocolate with sprinkles and talked about a science project she wanted to do on wind power. I listened, nodding, laughing at the right moments. You are famous now, she said suddenly. I frowned. Why do you say that? My teacher said you were on the news, she replied. She said you were brave. I looked at her, at the sticky fingers and wide eyes. I was careful, I said. She considered that. That is better, she decided. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand. A final message from Mark sat unread in my inbox. I opened it. I never thought you would choose the system over blood. I typed back slowly. I chose my daughter. There was no reply. In the days that followed, Mark's name faded from conversations. He became a footnote, a former manager, a cautionary example mentioned without details. People moved on. But something had changed in the room when technicians spoke now. A subtle shift. More questions. Less blind trust. I returned to the wind farm a month later, standing beneath a turbine as it turned against a clear sky. The sound was smooth, honest. I placed my hand against the tower, feeling the vibration. This machine was not innocent. It was not guilty. It was simply responding to the forces applied to it. So was I. As I walked back to my truck, my phone buzzed with one last notification. Audit cycle closed. I exhaled slowly. This was the part no one filmed. The part after the cameras left. The quiet knowledge that the story would be told without you at its center. I was fine with that, because the truth was not that I had won. The truth was that the system had been forced to look at itself. And for now, that was enough. After the briefing, people expected something more. A fall. A confession. A headline with a name in bold letters and a photo taken at the worst possible angle. That is how stories usually end, especially the ones people retell. But this one did not. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Emails slowed. Meetings were canceled or postponed. Everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and when it did not, they pretended that was exactly what they had expected all along. I felt it most in the way people spoke to me. Careful, respectful, distant. They asked for my input, but they did not linger. They thanked me, but they did not congratulate me. It was as if everyone understood. on some unspoken level, that praising me too loudly would force them to acknowledge what they had ignored for years. I did not correct them. My new role came with access, but also with boundaries. I could advise, I could review, I could flag risks, but I could not make final decisions. That power still belonged to committees and boards and people who spoke in paragraphs. I accepted that. Power, I had learned, was not always about the last signature. Sometimes it was about where the process slowed down. Mark called once more. It was late, after Lily was asleep. His name lit up my phone, and for a moment I considered letting it ring. Then I answered. "You did not have to do it like that," he said. His voice sounded older, thinner. "Like what?" I asked. "Public," he said. "You could have kept it internal." "I did," I replied. "I kept the worst of it internal." He laughed softly. "You think that was mercy?" "I think it was enough," I said. "You could still end me," he said. "You know that." "Yes," I said. There it was. The truth he could not escape. "Why did you not?" he asked. I leaned back against the couch and stared at the dark window. "Because I do not want Lily growing up thinking that destroying people is how you fix things," I said. He was quiet for a long time. "You always were too sentimental," he said finally. "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe you were always too afraid to stop." He sighed. "You think this makes you different from me." "It does," I said. "I know when to quit." He did not argue with that. After we hung up, I sat there listening to the hum of the house, the refrigerator cycling, the faint sound of traffic outside, ordinary noises that meant nothing was on fire. I thought about what it would feel like to send the files, to press one button and let everything crash down. The thought did not excite me. It exhausted me. I had spent weeks living inside tension, measuring words, calculating consequences. I did not want to build a life out of that. The following month, Lily had a school assembly. Parents sat in folding chairs while kids sang songs about science and recycling. When Lily's class stepped forward, she scanned the crowd until she saw me. She smiled and waved. In that moment, the rest of it fell into perspective. Mark had wanted me to believe that sacrifice was noble when it served his goals. That pressure justified shortcuts. That family loyalty meant silence. I had believed him because believing him was easier than standing alone. But standing alone, it turned out, was not the same as being lonely. After the assembly, Lily took my hand. "Are you still fixing the wind machines?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Good," she replied. "They help people." "So do rules," I said. She wrinkled her nose. "Rules are boring. Only when they work," I said, smiling. At work, the changes settled in slowly. The new oversight committees were awkward at first. Engineers resented the extra steps. Managers complained about delays. But over time, habits shifted. Incidents decreased. So did the quiet panic I used to feel every time my phone buzzed late at night. One afternoon, a junior technician stopped me in the hallway. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "Why did you not go all the way?" he asked. "Everyone knows you could have." I thought about the question carefully. "Because I did not want to replace one kind of fear with another," I said. "I wanted people to do the right thing because they were watched, not because they were terrified." He nodded slowly, like he was storing that away for later. That night, I cleaned out the drawer where I kept the external drive. I did not destroy it. I labeled it contingency. Then I locked it away, not as leverage, as insurance. For Lily, for myself, for the next person someone decided was expendable. Weeks passed. Then months. Mark sent a postcard from overseas, a city skyline, a short message about consulting work and long flights. No apology, no bitterness, just distance. I pinned it to the fridge next to Lily's drawing of the windmill. Two versions of the same story, side by side. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I had made the right choice. If justice meant more than restraint. If mercy without repentance was just another form of weakness. Then I would wake up in the morning, make breakfast, walk Lily to school, and go to a job where my name no longer appeared next to quiet disasters. And the doubt would fade. I had not won. I had not lost. I had stepped out of a cycle that demanded blood to prove truth. That was the twist no one applauded. The kind that did not feel like victory until much later, when you realized how much worse it could have been, and how deliberately you had chosen otherwise. The aftermath did not arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly, through small adjustments that only mattered if you paid attention. My title sounded important enough when people said it out loud, but in practice, it meant I was now the person others called before making a decision they were unsure about. Not to approve it, just to sense-check it. To ask the question no one wanted to ask in a room full of confident voices. At first, they treated me like a warning sign. They spoke carefully around me. They explained things twice. They avoided shortcuts when I was present, then slipped back into old habits when they thought I was not looking. I did not call them out. I did not need to. Fear is loud. It announces itself. Responsibility is quieter. It takes time to grow. Some days, I drove 3 hours to a site just to stand there and watch a process run as intended. No intervention, no emergency, just machines doing what they were built to do. Those were the best days. Other days, I sat in meetings where people debated liability instead of safety, where spreadsheets mattered more than fatigue curves. On those days, I spoke once, clearly, then stopped. I learned when words mattered. At home, life settled into a rhythm I had not known before. I was there when Lily woke up. I was there when she came home from school. I cooked dinners that did not come from boxes. I learned which nights she needed help with homework and which nights she wanted to be left alone with her thoughts. She did not ask about the airport anymore. Children know when questions lead nowhere. One evening, she asked me why Uncle Mark did not call much. "He is far away," I said. "Is he lonely?" she asked. I considered the question. "Sometimes," I said, "but loneliness is not always about distance." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to drawing. At work, Mark's absence became permanent without ceremony. His projects were reassigned. His name was removed from directories. New people filled his space, eager and careful. No one spoke badly about him. No one spoke well, either. That was the kind of erasure he had never imagined. A few months later, compliance closed my case officially. The email was brief, findings inconclusive. No further action required. Inconclusive. I laughed quietly when I read it. The truth had been too large to fit neatly into a conclusion that would not implicate too many hands. That was fine. I did not need vindication from a system that had almost swallowed me. I needed space. I took a short leave of absence that summer. Not a vacation, just time. Lily and I drove north, away from the wind farms and the cities. We stayed in small towns where no one recognized me and no one cared what I did for a living. One afternoon, we stood by a lake watching the water move in slow, lazy waves. "Does the wind ever get tired?" Lily asked. "Yes," I said. "That is why machines have to rest." She thought about that. "Do people need to rest too?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "especially people." That night, after she fell asleep, I sat outside the cabin, listening to the quiet. No traffic, no alerts, no deadlines pressing against my chest. For the first time since the airport, I let myself feel something I had avoided. Grief, not for Mark. For the version of myself that had believed silence was safety. I mourned the years I had spent shrinking, the choices I had let others make for me. I mourned the trust I could not give back to Lily in its original form, unbroken and naive. But grief, I learned, was not a failure. It was a transition. When we returned, work resumed with a steadiness that surprised me. The systems held. The reviews became routine. Emergencies grew rarer. People began to relax. And that, strangely, made me more alert than ever. One afternoon, a senior manager pulled me aside. "You have influence now," he said. "Whether you want it or not." "I know," I replied. "You could go further," he added. "Push for more authority. Shape policy." I looked at him. "I am shaping behavior," I said. "That lasts longer." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. At home, Lily started a science fair project about wind energy. She built a small turbine out of cardboard and plastic spoons. When it spun, her face lit up. "It works," she said proudly. I watched it turn, thinking of how close I had come to being labeled a failure by forces I could not see. "Yes," I said. "It does." The external drive remained in its place, untouched. I did not think about it every day anymore. Its presence was no longer heavy. It was simply there. A reminder. One evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me with sudden seriousness. "Daddy," she said, "if someone does something bad, do you always have to make them pay?" I sat on the edge of her bed and chose my words carefully. "No," I said. "Sometimes you make sure they cannot do it again." She smiled sleepily. "That sounds better." As I turned off the light and closed her door, I realized something that surprised me. I was no longer waiting for the story to end. This was it. Not a victory lap, not a scar. Just a life that had bent under pressure and found a new shape. Mark would live with his choices, far from the machines he had tried to control. I would live with mine, closer to the ground than I had ever been. And in that quiet distance between destruction and forgiveness, I had found something unexpected. Peace. The story did not end with a sentence anyone could quote. There was no courtroom, no flashing cameras, no moment where everyone finally understood what had almost happened. Life does not work that way. It moves forward quietly, carrying its damage and its lessons in equal measure. The first real sign that things were different came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was standing at a site outside a small town, watching a crew run through a routine shutdown. No alarms, no raised voices. Just a checklist. Read aloud, confirmed, executed. When the turbine powered down, it did so smoothly, like a machine that trusted the people handling it. One of the younger technicians looked at me and nodded. "All good," he said. That phrase stayed with me longer than it should have. All good did not mean perfect. It meant nothing was being hidden. It meant no one was being sacrificed to make numbers look better on a screen. It meant the system was breathing. That afternoon, I drove home earlier than usual. Lily was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with her homework spread out in a messy pile. She looked up when I came in. "You are early," she said. "I am done for the day," I replied. She smiled, the kind of smile that does not question whether a promise will hold. We made dinner together. She stirred the pot carefully while I chopped vegetables. The radio played softly in the background. Outside, the sky darkened in slow, even layers. After dinner, she asked if we could walk. We went around the block, hands swinging between us. Porch lights flicked on one by one. Somewhere down the street, someone laughed. "Do you miss flying?" she asked suddenly. I thought about the question. "I miss parts of it," I said. "Mostly the quiet above the clouds." "Why do you not do it anymore?" she asked. "Because I like being here when you wake up," I said. She nodded, accepting that without needing more. That night, after she was asleep, I stood in the doorway of her room for a long moment, watching, listening, memorizing the ordinary. Then I went to the living room and opened the drawer. The external drive sat where it always had. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, then slid it back into place. Not because I was afraid to use it, because I no longer needed it to feel safe. The next morning, I received an email from the auditors. No request, no questions, just a note. "Your cooperation materially improved oversight outcomes." I deleted it. Some acknowledgments arrived too late to matter. At work, I turned down an offer to move into management. Higher pay, more authority, less field time. They were surprised. "I am where I am most useful," I told them. That answer used to sound like an excuse. Now it sounded like a boundary. Months passed. Mark sent one final message. "I am staying overseas longer. New contracts. New start." I stared at the words for a long time before replying. "I hope you find what you are looking for." That was all. I did not ask questions. I did not offer forgiveness. I did not close the door loudly. I simply let it be. On a crisp fall morning, Lily and I visited a small hill overlooking a wind farm. The turbines turned steadily against a blue sky. She ran ahead, arms stretched wide, pretending she could feel the wind pushing her forward. "Look," she called. "They are all moving together." "Yes," I said. "That is the goal." She came back to stand beside me, her hand slipping into mine. "Daddy," she said, If something breaks again, will you fix it? I looked at the machines, at the long white towers casting shadows across the land. Yes, I said, but I will also ask why it broke. She considered that, then nodded, satisfied. As we walked back to the car, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. I had not become powerful. I had become deliberate. I no longer measured my worth by how much pressure I could absorb without complaining. I measured it by how little damage I allowed to pass through me to the people who depended on me. The airport was still there. The memory of that room still existed. The fear still visited sometimes, late at night, when the house was too quiet, but it no longer defined me. I had stepped out of a story where survival required silence. I had chosen a different ending. Not louder, not cleaner, just truer. And in that truth, I found something I had never been taught to expect. A life that did not need to prove itself by breaking someone else. A life that held, steady, and unremarkable, like a machine finally allowed to run the way it was meant to. That was enough. It would always be enough.